Hey guys, welcome to Module 7, the psychology of value in Web3 games. So, what are some of the things we're going to go over today? Designing emotions, ownership, and engagement, how we can facilitate these types of behaviors in our Web3 games. And again, my name is Kwame, and I'll be your instructor. So, an overview, how players perceive value. We'll go over some of the psychological principles that shape behavior, and then we will learn how we can apply these principles into our Web3 game economies. So, value cannot just be defined as something that is just financial in nature. So, players value uniqueness, they value the status that they have in the game, certain achievements, and how that defines the identity. There's also a emotional connection to the progress and ownership, being able to show your friends, your peers, and other players things that you have, done in the game. And tokens and NFTs enhance this perceived value because there's a sense of ownership. There's a sense of finality that these things are real, that you didn't cheat in order to get this. And also, when we are looking into Web3 games, we can use these NFTs and tokens in order to gate access to other things, which are you're able to do this in traditional Web 2 games, but not with the sense of, traceability that the blockchain gives us. And that's one of the things that are really unique to Web 3 games is that we can use the blockchain as a way to add finality and add traceability to these particular things that we've been talking about. So, key psychological drivers. So, we have scarceability. There is limited items feel more valuable. So, if there's a scarce amount of something and there's a lot of people trying to obtain this thing, then that also gives that, a scarce ability to it. There is also loss aversion. So losing feels worse than gaining feels good. So when a player is playing a game and they're losing specific things, that feels a lot more than the gaining of something. So there's a sunk cost fallacy. There's continued play due to past investment. So you've paid a lot to gain certain things or gain gems or gain whatever it is in the game. And as you play and you are losing, you're continuing to play just because you had lost something. And then there's social proof. So players follow perceived successful behavior. They see other people gaining these particular levels in the game, and others want to follow suit. So, ownership and identity. So true digital ownership changes a player's mindset. Now, this might be a lot easier for us to define if you are already familiar with, Web3 having things that are inscribed onto the blockchain, but this might not be as well versed if you're coming from a traditional Web 2 game. So skins, land, and characters are tied to wallets, which has a deeper attachment. These are things that you own. Whether the game exists or not is irrelevant in these scenarios. And NFTs allow for self-expression and in-game legacy. Now, as long as the blockchain exists, those assets exist as well. So think of games that you played as a kid with your family. I remember playing like Monopoly and things like that. Now, say that there was this epic game that you had won and, you owned, 80% of all the land and it was just an epic run. That game and all those achievements are last on the blockchain and they are irrefutable because you can just look up and on this date I was playing this game and here is the assets. One thing that's actually really cool that is not really talked about a lot is that as games last for, decades and centennial years, those assets can be handed down to another generation of players. And you could look back and look at, Grandpa Jim, played, this game in, 2025 and collected these items and handed down, these assets to the family. So there's a lot of cool, scenarios that blockchain-based games allow that just traditional games from the Web 2 era just they're impossible to facilitate. Progression and loyalty. So progression, psychological reward loop. So as you progress, you obtain a specific NFT for passing level 1, level 2. Maybe you collected all of the, 100% of the rare stones that's inscribed into the NFT itself for that character. Retention improves with milestone rewards. So this is a traditional, game loop, game mechanic. There's nothing special about what I'm saying here that traditional Web 2 game designers don't already know. The one barrier that traditional Web 2 game designers do not take into account in Web 3 is how we can map this into the economic loop. So traditional Web 2 games, we have just a traditional game player loop. And in Web 3 games, we have this economic loop that coincides, and those two things need to marry each other. Loyalty systems can be tokenized. So NFT badges, season rewards, battle passes, um, all these different types of things are attached to the player and they're tokenized on chain for to make sure that you can verify these things later on. So the emotional risks in Web 3, players may tie identity too strongly to value. And this is a balance that, traditional Web 2 games and Web 3 games, it's a balancing act, but you need to take this into consideration. Volatility can cause frustration and churn, like player drop off. So, say that you have these particular NFTs that are mapped to, say, a sword or in-game gems or whatever the case may be, tokens or NFTs. And there is a monetary value. So you buy a sword in game, it's processed as an NFT, and there is an initial value to it. Say it's $10. And as that game goes on, you lose half of the value of that game, of that item. And now it's $5. Now, from a player's point of view, they might think, well, hey, I can get this item for half the price. But when we had our earlier lectures, we defined the different types of player types. And there's going to be this investor layer there as well, and they are going to see this as being a 50% loss. And if they have a bunch of these items, say that they are a whale, the contract that you are writing doesn't have this anti-whale mechanism applied to it, people will start, or players will start, maybe dumping these assets. And that's not what we want to see. So as the financial incentives are balanced with the in-game components, is that balance there? And can the volatility of, say, the actual market sustain the actual in-game value that these particular assets hold? Over-financialization undermines fun. So it doesn't matter if your game is really, really fun to play. If the core economic loop in the game is over financialized, then that's going to take away from any fun that the game basically will give to the player. So again, this is where, the balancing and the simulation of the game comes in really important to make sure that these two, which are never going to be, totally equal, but one doesn't set itself too much higher above the other. And Addiction mechanics must be handled ethically. So addiction mechanics are these things that pull you in to, buy another thing, to get to another place, and you buy something else and you get higher. Or there's a mechanic, and I'm using quotes here because I don't consider it a game mechanic, but it's like this pay to earn. So you might be familiar if you've been around the Web3 gaming space in the 2020, 2021 era where you had, play to earn. Well, an addiction mechanic would be more of like a pay to earn or a pay to play. So you must have X in order to do Y. And if you can't do Y in game to get there because it's extremely hard and it gets frustrating, in order to, bypass all this hurt and, learning of the game and things of that nature, you can pay X to get Y in order to, get Z, right? And remember that like even though that there's this high component of financialization in Web3 games, the the main core game loop must allow the player to be able to achieve all the same things without having to put in a financial component to it. Now, there may be certain things like where we're talking about in the earlier slides with skins, and there is a lot of player customization, and that's an avenue for player game developers and game designers to add a mechanism so that they can actually earn some money, but that shouldn't be the core part. So those are just added assets or added additions for people who love to do player customization. I'm definitely one of them and don't mind spending, extra money to make my character more, pleasing to myself. But that shouldn't be the core component to how all these things work. So designing our games with psychology in mind. So the first point here is that we want to respect players' time and effort. The time is the most, you know, valuable asset that everyone has. So we want to make sure that the amount of time and effort that the player puts into doing these things into the game, that there is some kind of reward that they're getting. Like we're kind of trained that way as humans, is that if we do certain things and we get to certain goals, we get these nice little flashy things, and that allows us or gives us in our mind the ability to want to have that feeling again and progress. Offer meaningful rewards, not just tokens. So we were talking about how inflation in the game will come from, massive dumping of tokens for doing or over the term that we used was over incentivization for players doing certain things. So make the rewards meaningful. So let's take the example in the voxelverse. You are, in your game world, you're mining, you're gaining prospect. Prospect is used in order to gain, say, seeds in order to, grow your crops and feed yourself, or to grow your crops and to sell your crops on the open market because there's another player who may not have the resources on their land in order to do these said things. Use scarcity ethically. So if you're going to have scarce assets inside of your game, allow them to be a part of the overall game loop and use it ethically in the sense of that, there might be these scarce assets. Don't inflate them to the moon or allow players to gain these assets and put these high markups in it. This is really tricky too, but the simulation component that we talked about in the previous lectures goes over this and how to mitigate these risks. Balance engagement loops without manipulation. Now, this one is per core and should be a part of just every game design. And all good games balance engagement loops without manipulating the players to do specific things or to gain specific items. There should be a sense of choose your own adventure when you're designing these types of games that have financial incentives baked into them. So, examples of emotional game design, Fortnite skins have identity within the community, plus they also have rarity. I had purchased a Nintendo Switch and it had a very rare NFT because who buys a Switch to play Fortnite? But there is this sense of scarcity, and when I do, play Fortnite and I use this skin, I get, a lot of people making comments on it. Clash of Clans, we have sunk cost plus progress plus competition, how this wraps in. This is traditional, Web 2, but Clash of Clans was a breakout hit. Anybody who's watching this video and has stuck this long will remember Clash of Clans. And in Web3 games, we have our non-fungible tokens plus ownership plus this speculative value that maybe these specific types of NFTs may have, value in the future. And this is like a big part. And it's another thing that you're going to have to balance within your actual community itself. Are your players there to play the game and just have fun? And this, financial incentive is just a part of this overall thesis, or is that the only thing that they're looking at? And it's a balance, and you'll know by your community and the people who are playing your game why they're there. So, this is the end of this lecture, but what is coming up next? So, in Module 8, the final lecture in this series will be building a token smart contract. So, we're going to take a lot of these things that we've been talking about and actually build out some tokens. There's going to be some time to design and deploy your in-game currency with Solidity. So we're going to be using the Solidity smart contract programming language. So this is for EVM blockchains. So all the lectures that we've done to this point are to, are built for the thought of blockchain games, but are not specific to any blockchain. Our next lecture will be very specific to the EVM chain, and but you can take these ideas and map them out to whatever blockchain and whatever programming language that blockchain adheres to. So this has been really great so far. Really look forward to seeing you guys in the next lecture. And that is it for me. Bye for now.